Mr. President-elect, welcome to the program. How surprised were you by the scale of your win? This is the first time an opposition candidate has beaten an incumbent in Nigeria.
Well, I'm not surprised because of how we came into the merger. The main opposition parties in Nigeria decided to come together to face the ruling party. That means we have a national spread, and we have experienced political parties and politicians across the length and breadth of the country. So it's not surprising.
Mr. President-elect, good luck, Jonathan, the outgoing president, conceded. He also said this showed that democracy is here to stay in Nigeria. And you yourself have said that you want reconciliation. You said, let me state clearly that President Jonathan has nothing to fear from me. He is a great Nigerian and still our president. That's what you have said earlier today. Do you worry about reconciling the nation that has been so bitterly divided?
Well, I am not, because the actual division that is worth bothering about, I think, in terms of social instability, that is insecurity, is in the northeast and in the Delta area, which I think they have been with the country long enough that we know how they started and what stage they are now. And therefore, we are confident that we will rapidly give attention to security in the country, and I believe we will effectively deal with them in few months when we get into office.
So, Mr. Buhari, how will you do it? Boko Haram has been a plague on your nation for years now. I mean, the famous girls, the girls of Chibok, who are still not returned. How are you going to be able to do what the previous government didn't do?
Well, I think, firstly, we had to register the cooperation of the neighboring countries, Cameroon, Chad, and Niger. Although some effort was made by this administration, but it wasn't good enough, and it was too late, too little. We expected the federal government, at least 4 years ago, to have sat down with these countries I mentioned to make sure they don't allow the terrorists free movement across borders, training facilities, and movement of weapons. This was only done about 2 months ago. And we have seen the positive side by the way the Chadians, the Nigerians, and the Cameroonians are virtually fighting the Boko Haram more than Nigeria is doing until recently. So really, we have seen enough, and we have enough law enforcement agencies to face the Boko Haram squarely.
Because you said we shall spare no effort until we defeat terrorism, and I assure you that Boko Haram will soon know the strength of our collective will. And as you said, it has taken militaries from other nations to help you so far. Are the Nigerian military, or will they be up to this challenge that the whole world is looking at, Mr. President-elect?
I believe they will be. And I believe, if you can recall, the Nigerian soldiers, out of all ethical expectations, were given interview to foreign journalists that they were being sent to face the terrorists and get mowed down because of lack of proper weapons and training and leadership. And then the National Assembly attempted to conduct hearing by finding out how much the National Assembly approved in terms of budgetary allocation for weapons and training in the last 3-4 years. And they wanted to invite the the service chiefs and the chief of defense staff. But that hearing was curtailed by the administration. So the performance of the military was and is still being affected by corruption in the system.
Mr. Buhari, you are in fact General Buhari. You were a military ruler. You came to power after a coup in 1980s. And as you know, and I read all this to you the last time we talked, you know, you had banned political meetings and free speech. You had detained thousands of people. There were secret tribunals executing people for crimes that were not capital offenses. This all went on under your rule in the 80s. Have you changed? Are you now a real Democrat?
The only thing you haven't said is that I did that what you alleged to have been done by me under military administration. And since then, I am a converted Democrat. And I attempted to get to this office 3 times, and 3 times I ended up in the highest court in the country, the Supreme Court. And the allegations that people were executed for for offenses that are not death sentence, I think you are wrong. When we came into power, this is December 1983, as a military administration, we decided as a government to prescribe a death sentence on drug traffickers. So there was a law. We made the law before people were successfully prosecuted and executed.
And what about corruption? You mentioned corruption earlier. That is such a huge problem for Nigeria. You are such a rich country, and yet so much gets siphoned off into people's pockets. What will you do differently to make sure that that is dramatically reduced?
Well, this is not very difficult from my experience. And it is on record that in every ministry, in every first starter you go in Nigeria, there are documents about administrative instructions and financial instructions. But those instructions were ignored because leadership at various stages were being held hostage because of their corrupt practices. And if we, and God willing we shall, make sure that corruption is eradicated in Nigeria.
And finally, Mr. President-elect, as I said, you're a very, very rich country, the biggest economy in Africa, and yet the price of oil is plunging. How do you, tackle these big economic challenges you have, particularly the inequality that you yourself have campaigned on trying to bridge?
Well, I think the question of imposing accountability at every step of leadership is one of the ways. The laws are there. The problem is that the laws have been ignored for so long that a culture of corruption has been developed, and that has to be arrested immediately. People must be held accountable at various levels about public funds and property. And I assure you that if we successfully plug that holes on corruption, there will be resources that can be utilized to improve infrastructure and I think work hard to invest in agriculture and mining and provide jobs to able-bodied unemployed before detailed studies are made and resources allocated, for further training and infrastructure development in the country.
President-elect Muhammadu Buhari, thank you very much for joining us for your first interview since your victory yesterday.